Jean-Claude Trichet, welcome to the WPC TV. You are an extraordinarily distinguished central banker. First of all, the Banque de France, and then, of course, you were at the European Central Bank. So you've lived through some very, very interesting times. How do you view, from your perspective, having left the ECB, the present situation in the Eurozone and the problems, if I can call it that, of the Euro?
Well, first of all, I would say that we are experiencing since 5 years and a half a global crisis of the advanced economy. That's my understanding of the situation since, say, August 2007. For the first time, the advanced economy, for the first time since World War II, were put in a situation where their resilience was at stake, where they could have had the collapse of their financial system, full-fledged collapse. And it was very, I would say, different from the previous global crisis, where you had the emerging countries progressively put into question. Now it was the turn of the advanced economy in a way. And I see several episodes in this crisis. We had an episode of financial turbulences from, I would say, the subprime up to Lehman Brothers. Then a second episode of immediate threat of a total collapse of the financial sector from Lehman Brothers up to the end of 2009. And we avoided, of course, the house of cards to collapse, but we had to take responsibilities that are very heavy, central banks and governments. And then at the end of 2009, we had the third episode, which was the sovereign risk crisis. Two first episodes, epicenter of the crisis in the US. Last episode, epicenter of the crisis in the euro area. And we are still experiencing the third episode. So a lot of good decisions have been taken, a lot of diagnoses were made, but again, we are experiencing this crisis. It's a crisis of some sovereign risk in the euro area. In my own understanding, it's not a crisis of the euro. Mm-hmm. The euro as a currency has been remarkably credible all over that period, including since Europe is the epicenter of the crisis. To give you one example, the value of the euro vis-à-vis the dollar never went below the entry level of 99. And it's clearly a crisis where we have to improve governance, I would say economic and fiscal governance in the euro area. That is the lesson of the crisis. In a way, you have to change the macro policy probably in the US, probably in Japan, to take the two of the big advanced economy of the size of the euro area. And that will be done when time comes, we will see. As far as we are concerned, the main problem is not, paradoxically, the fundamentals of the euro area as a whole, which are pretty good on the fiscal side, better than perhaps the US or the Japanese. But it is the governance of the system, because we let country and economies deviate from the average, put themselves in a situation of abnormal vulnerability. And this is not normal in a single currency area, a single market with a single currency. So again, we have to improve decisively governance in Europe.
Which means greater fiscal integration, more consolidated oversight by political bodies.
Well, first of all, it means apply the rule when they exist. Yeah. And it was...
well, it's France and Germany, of course, who first wrote the rule.
Exactly. This is, to me, there are 6 reasons why we are the epicenter of the present crisis in the euro area. First reason, we didn't apply the Stability and Growth Pact, and Germany, France, and Italy were the big countries that called for not applying the pact. It was an enormous mistake. It's the first reason. Second reason, we did not invent ex ante an equivalent monitoring of the in competitive indicators of the competitiveness of the excessive imbalances. And with all the benefit of the hindsight, it should have been done. We should have surveyed the evolution of the unit labor cost of Greece. Yes. The fiscal soundness is one thing, but you have also to survey very carefully this kind of thing in a single currency area. Second reason. Third reason, and there I accept that it was difficult to foresee that we would have to cope with a very, very extraordinary crisis, but we didn't have a banking union from the very beginning, and we didn't have any crisis management tool. We had to invent the FSF and the ESM and the Stabilization Fund from scratch because they did not exist at all. So this makes four reasons. And then I would add, because I trust it is very, very important, and it was again mentioned by Mario Monti here, we did not complete as we should have the single market. And it's a question for the 27, yes. But for the 17 it is particularly important. And we did not do the job as regards structural reforms, which was also, I would say, an endeavor of the 27, with, of course, the 27 being at stake for this endeavor, but for the 17, not having a complete single market and not having appropriate structural reforms creates anomalies in the functioning of the economy, which are very, very dangerous when you are running a single market with a single currency.
If you look at the remedies, I mean, they involve, obviously, structural reform of quite a punishing nature in Greece in particular, but also an austerity program that could be self-defeating, certainly in terms of the social unrest that it seems already to be provoking. I mean, does there come a point where actually the cure is worse than the illness?
Of course, we have to fully understand that if you have to adjust in dramatic circumstances, it is not the fault of the people. The average citizen in countries that were poorly managed were not, I would say, directly responsible for the poor management of the government or parliament. Still, there is no way in the present world now, including for the advanced economy, that you could permanently spend more than you earn. And that's the problem. In some cases, one country in particular, but there are many, many cases, when you are spending 16% of your GDP more than what you earn, where is the benefactor, the mécène that would be very keen on giving you every year 16% more, or even 15% more, or even 14% more? No, so we are in a universe where, in any case, you have to go back to a normal behavior, because again, that's unavoidable, absolutely unavoidable. So all the problem is to do that as, I would say, responsibly as possible, in an orderly manner and not in a disorderly manner, and in trying to protect jobs as much as possible, which calls for efforts made by those who have a job, because otherwise it is those who have no job that are the adjustment parameter.
Indeed, indeed.
And when I look at some countries, I am afraid that they adjust because you have to adjust. And then I'm not sure that they take the decision which permit to protect as much as possible jobs, even if it is, of course, at the price of a diminishing of the revenues. It's much better to diminish revenues than to have jobs.
Yes.
And to continue to spend the same quantity, but with more people spending because there are more people that have job, than to concentrate on those who have a job, permit them not to make big changes in their own revenue, but then you have a very big amount of people that have no jobs at all.
Sure.
So again, it's really a question of being extremely careful to adjust, because adjustment is absolutely unavoidable. And if you have some sensitivities saying we would be better off if we would not accept all what the conditionality we are imposed, then they would impose to themselves overnight a much harsher conditionality, because they would have overnight to accept not to spend more than they earn. And we know how it works.
It should be a huge adjustment.
And we know how it works.
Let me ask you, let me just turn your attention just for a final question to France. There was a special report in The Economist recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the headline was, France, the time bomb at the heart of Europe. And the essential argument was that France needed to make some structural reforms, especially to the labor market, and it had not made these reforms. It wasn't certain that it was going to make these reforms, and I think the implication of the article was that it was unlikely actually to make the reforms. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I put aside the logic of communication, which is very close to the logic of markets, you know, which was summed up by a British friend. First of all, simplify. Second, exaggerate.
Yes.
Which is
indeed.
But that being said, that being put aside, all countries in Europe, in my opinion, have, without any exception, have to work on their structural reforms. And labor market reform are, of course, of the essence, as well as, again, goods and services reform in order to complete the single market, and eliminating more generally all the rents in your economy, augmenting the capacity to adjust. We are in a world where we have China, we have India, we have Brazil and Mexico, we have Africa, which is going now at a very, very rapid speed. The advanced economy, and particularly Europe, and particularly the euro area, and France, of course, with all others, has to adjust. And I always make this recommendation myself when I was governor of Banque de France or in the ECB. Second, you have also to look at your competitiveness in terms of cost competitiveness. The success of Germany is a success of structural reforms of Schröder, but also, and perhaps even more in terms of what we observe at the present moment, the fact that costs have been controlled extremely well during all the last 14 years. Year after year after year, the unit labor cost grew less in the nominal terms than in the average of the euro area. So competitiveness has been regained year after year. The, I would say, workers, employees, engineers, entrepreneurs, I mean, all the productive sector was extraordinarily careful to protect jobs and to permit to consolidate jobs, and also to create jobs through appropriate cost competitiveness. And the result is really striking. So it seems to me that it is something which all countries have to have in mind. France knows that, because the competitive disinflation policy, which was pursued in the 80s and the 90s and permitted the euro to be set up, was a success. And at the end of the 90s, France had a current account surplus. But it was after years and years and years of very close monitoring of the cost. So structural reforms plus close monitoring of cost is clearly the good recipe, and I would certainly call for that.
Let's hope it happens. Jean-Claude Trichet, thank you very much indeed. Mille merci.
Thank you.